In Washington state, a House committee has approved a measure that would make landlords give nearly 8 months' notice of a rent increase of more than 5%. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over a bunch of anti-landlord legislation that's going on up in Washington state. It shouldn't surprise you that I'm covering Washington state once again because, as I've said, you know what? They keep passing ridiculous anti-landlord, anti-property rights laws up there, and they keep pushing more and more measures. And at the same time, they're wondering, well, why is housing so expensive here? Why does no one want to be a landlord? Why are developers not building here? Well, it's all that nonsense that you're pushing, okay? If you can't figure that out, then you have your head shoved up somewhere that I shouldn't talk about. But, this is another example of, just the government thinking that they can solve all problems with passing more laws, more rules, and more regulations, when the only thing they're doing is making life so complicated that no one can actually operate. Not the landlords, not the developers, or anyone else who provides housing. And the few people who are able to operate, they charge way, way higher rents. And you know what? It's not going to help the affordable housing crisis. It's just not, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. What do you think of a measure that requires landlords to give 8 months notice of a 5% or more rent increase? I mean, do you really think that's going to help? Because you know what? A 5% rent increase is almost nothing when you really think about it, okay? Think about, what is 5% of $1,000? It's a pretty simple math. It's $50. So if you're going to increase your rent more than $50 a month for a person who's paying $1,000 rent, well, you have to give that person 8 months notice. So if you want to bring your rents up to $1,100 a month, right, which is a quite reasonable rent increase, when you're talking about the sums of money, okay? When we're talking about $1,000, bringing your rent up to $1,100 a month, and you're going to have to say, okay, well, I'm going to have to plan 8 months out after, you just can't plan that far ahead. You just can't. So, yeah, a lot of landlords, especially the small mom and pop ones, are going to get caught up in this nonsense. And that's the one thing that I keep trying to push, okay? Yeah, these corporate landlords, they have large staffs, they've got legal teams, etc., right? They can better navigate these complicated systems, especially when they're passing new laws all the time. But you know who doesn't have all that? The smaller mom and pop landlords who are self-managing, who maybe own one property, and they're just renting the place, and they're like, you know what, I'm renting my place for far below market rents, and I need to bring the rents up a little bit so that I can continue to pay my bills. Well, now you're coming foul across this new law that says that, oh, you have to give them 8 months notice. You see how ridiculous all this is? Oh, goodness. Anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from original.newsbreak.com, and it says, Washington State House passed a bill requiring landlords to give tenants 180 to 220 days notice of more than a 5% increase in rent. Yeah, 220 days is more than 7 months, okay? That we're talking about nearly 8 months. In order to, you have to give them notice in nearly 8 months. So basically, the person's going to be moving into their unit, and as soon as they get their stuff unpacked, oh, listen, we're going to be increasing the rent next year. That's dumb, okay? The people who write these sort of bills and laws, they've obviously never been a landlord. They've never operated this sort of business, because they would understand we can't plan that far ahead. Or you're going to force our hands and force us to immediately call for rent increases even when we might not necessarily need it. But anyway, let's get into the article and see what it says. Washington State House Committee passed a substitute House Bill 1124, which states that a landlord may not increase the tenant's rent, excluding any charges for utilities, by more than 5% without providing written notice between 180 and 220 days before the increase takes effect. The notice must inform the tenant of the tenant's ability to terminate the tenancy without penalty. Substitute House Bill 1124 includes that a tenant who receives notice of a rent increase of more than 5% may terminate the tenancy at any point prior to the effective date of the increase by providing at least 20 days notice for a month-to-month or at least 45 days notice for a tenancy with a lease. And the landlord must prorate the rent owed to the tenant's move-out date. So they put in their provisions that say, oh, well, the tenant only has to give a 45-day notice and they can just break the contract. That's, you know how dumb that sounds to me? Basically what they're saying is your lease means nothing. If somebody signs a 1-year lease, right, and then you write, oh, well, we're going to increase the rent next year, mind you, by 10%. Well, they can just cut, the lease in half immediately. You know what? Basically they've turned longer leases into month-to-month because now the tenant has all the power and all the ability to, just terminate their lease at any point in time. And that's what bothers me a lot. You know what? We write all this stuff into our leases. There are contracts, legal contracts, yet they take away all of the power of those contracts. And they say, nope, this doesn't count, this doesn't count. I was like, but the person agreed to this. Nope, none of that counts. We're going to, the government knows more than you do about running your business. So therefore, no, the government doesn't know anything about running the landlord business. The only thing they know is how to get votes. And that's what they're trying to do with all this stupid legislation. They're appealing to tenants because they know in a lot of places tenants outnumber the property owners. Well, they obviously outnumber landlords. So, they are sitting here, they're pushing for votes, and maybe some of these politicians actually believe that this sort of thing will help, but it won't. It will not help anything. The only thing, like I said before, is going to do is force landlords to call for rent increases when they normally wouldn't have because they have to. They basically have to do it super early. Otherwise, they will not even be eligible for it. The bill states that a tenant who is charged and pays rent reflecting an increase of more than 5% without receiving the required written notice may recover actual damages in the amount of the excess rent paid and treble damages, costs, and reasonable attorney fees. The Substitute House Bill 1124 also concludes that a landlord may not charge a tenant a fee for late payment of rent that exceeds the lesser of 10% of the rental amount, excluding any charges for utilities, or $75 total. So yeah, now they're putting limits on late fees, it looks like, where $75 is the maximum late fee that a landlord could charge. So once again, right, government is stepping in there. They're saying, oh, well, there's all these bad You know what? No, that's a garbage argument. There's very few landlords who like to make late fees, and are charging out the yin yang for them. You know what? That is just idiotic. And every time I see these rules passed, I have to keep in mind that the people who are hurt the most by these rules are the ones who follow the rules. Okay? They're not the bad landlords. The bad landlords don't follow the rules anyway. They don't give a crap. Okay? They never will care, and they will go about operating in ways that are shady, right? But those bad landlords make up such a small percentage of landlords overall. I mean, I'm talking about less than 1% of all landlords are these bad guys that they're writing all these stupid rules for. And then the other 99%, well, you know what? We're left, trying to clean up the mess that all of these politicians have put in place. We're left following rules that nobody understands, that nobody knows. It's not like they send out a memo to all the landlords across town every time they change the law. Oh, you know what? Here's the new law. No, a lot of landlords are operating on, what they thought was legal, and they will get caught up in this nonsense where they're going to have to pay out of pocket money to the tenant for something that isn't their fault. That is a fair rent increase, and it was written into their contract, which the tenant signed. And yeah, that's my problem with all this. Those good landlords who get caught up in this nonsense, you know what they're going to say? If you're a single family home landlord and you get caught up in this mess, just, I'm not ever being a landlord again. I'm just going to sell my property to somebody who's an owner occupant and be done with this stupid business because the state of Washington doesn't care about me. That's what the landlord's going to say. Representative Strom Peterson first introduced the bill. The act is about protecting tenants from excessive rent and related fees by providing at least 6 months' notice for more than a 5% rent increase, allowing tenants the right to terminate a tenancy without penalty, and limiting late fees. Substitute House Bill 1124, sponsored by 18 representatives and passed out of the House Committee on Housing on January 26, 2023. The bill has been referred to the Rules Committee. This hasn't passed yet, but there's a very large likelihood that in a place like Washington State that this will pass, okay? And it is unfortunate for the landlords that are there that they have to deal with this sort of nonsense, but I would still fight. I would still call my representative, tell them that I'm opposed to the bill, explain to them why my business needs to be able to pass a rent increase much, much later than this 8 months. 8 months is ridiculous, okay? It is not even fathomable that they would think that, hey, we can plan that far out into the future. I can't see 8 months from now what inflation is going to be like, what my expenses are going to be like. You know, I think it's just not right. It's not fair, and that we should fight 100% against it.